and you'll find a lovely tree-shaded spot in campus. It's the Concordia Lutheran College, and it's nearing its 70th birthday. It began as a high school in 1926, and then grew into a two-year college, and today it's a four-year institution connected with the Missouri Synod Church. On Austin Faith Dialogue this morning, we'll discuss the past, present, and future of Concordia Lutheran College.
This is Austin Faith Dialogue, a public affairs program discussing the important crossroad of religion in life, produced by Austin Metropolitan Ministries in cooperation with KTBC TV. Austin Faith Dialogue highlights the interaction of the religious community with the social and cultural issues throughout our area. Now, today's edition of Austin Faith Dialogue.
Hello, I'm Richard Thompson, pastor of Central Presbyterian Church, and your host for this edition of Austin Faith Dialogue. And today we're going to be taking a closer look at one of the private religious colleges of the Austin area. And with us is Dr. David Zerson, the president of Concordia Lutheran College. He's been on campus now for a few months, and he's just beginning to settle in and bringing this institution into the latter part of the 20th century and into the 21st century. David, we're glad to have you with us.
Thank you very much, Richard. Good to be here.
And tell us a little bit about where you came from when you arrived this summer.
I moved most recently from Milwaukee, so from a cool northern climate into the heat of Austin August.
More than a culture shock. Huh?
That's right.
And you come here with experience in higher education and in church life otherwise. Just share a bit of that with us.
Well, I served as a clergyman in the Lutheran Church for a number of years in a variety of Chicago suburbs, serving congregations in those areas. Served my denomination in the capacity of continuing education for church professionals, and also served most recently in a university in Wisconsin, Concordia University, as dean of their School of Adult and Continuing Education. I see.
Now, in coming to Concordia, do you have continuing interest in continuing education?
Yes, it's part of who I am as a continuing learner, but also as a continuing educator. And out of personal interest, I'm pursuing a second doctorate at Columbia in adult education. And it's something that we'll be continuing to work at Concordia here in Austin.
Okay. Well, I'd like to come back to that because I think that's one of the definitions of your mission as you would look into the future. I have to admit to you, being interested in your location and your identity and your history. This is a school that goes back some 70 years. How did it start, and give us a little bit of a sense of the roots of the place.
Well, I like to refer to it as a floating dream because even before the 68 years in which we've been here in Austin, there was a dream to place a Lutheran college somewhere in the Southwest. It existed for a brief period of time in the 1800s in New Orleans, and interestingly enough, because of the yellow fever scare, the Texans were afraid to send their children to school there. Mm-hmm. And so there was a number of opportunities to move to places in Texas. It existed for a while in Giddings, and finally came to roost in 1926 here in Austin.
Okay, and when it did arrive here, it was not a four-year college. It was
right. In the Lutheran Church, there was a strong tie with the historical tradition of Europe, in which the gymnasium tradition provided for what might be equivalent to our high school and 2 years of junior college. And so it existed for a number of years. First of all, at the high school level, for 31 years it was a junior college, and only for 12 years have we been a baccalaureate institution.
Mm-hmm. So it's a process of evolution that has gone through and it sounds like it's continuing to.
And I suspect for years to come it will continue to evolve as it meets new kinds of constituencies, new student markets. Roughly, you may know 50% of all the people who are studying for credit in colleges and universities today are over the age of 25.
Oh, is that right?
So if an institution tries to appeal only to let's say a traditional student market, 18, 22, 24 years of age, it's speaking to only half of the potential student population.
Tell me about the way this, in which, as it started out, though, with the model of the gymnasium from Germany. It was serving families largely in and around Austin originally, and what is its constituency today in comparison?
Well, I think originally it served people primarily from Austin. Interestingly enough, it's not left that kind of mooring because 75% of our student body lives in the Austin area and 92% of our student body is from Texas. So we give an awful lot back to Texas, and
sure.
We are very much of a Texas institution.
And is that similar to the pattern in, I know there are other Concordia colleges in this Missouri Synod system?
There are 10 Concordias, and that would be rather unusual to have that much of a concentration from a specific state and also from the city in which the institution is located.
Mm-hmm. Concordia is associated within church circles with the Missouri Synod Lutheran tradition. Tell us about, just before we focus completely on Austin, the little broader picture of the Concordia system.
For reasons that aren't altogether clear to me or perhaps to anyone, when it came to naming schools within the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, the name Concordia was used very popularly and applied to other things as well, such as seminaries and even a publishing house. So that once there were 12 Concordias in the United States, there's another one in Edmonton, Canada, and 2 Concordia seminaries in Canada. But today there are 10 Concordia colleges and universities, depending on their status, scattered from New York to Los Angeles to Chicago to St. Paul, Minnesota, and here Austin, Texas.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you really have a broader connection in that regard. And before the show, you were telling me that because of your telecommunications center there at the campus near off Red River, between Red River and I-35,
Mm-hmm.
You're going to maybe have a fiber optic connection with these other schools, or telecommunications in some way?
Well, at the moment, compressed video is the approach that's being considered to link these 10 schools electronically so that students in New York or students in Los Angeles might be able to take classes together interactively. Mm-hmm. So we've already piloted it in September, and this coming summer we expect to have that system in operation.
Okay, well, let's just imagine what it's going to be like in the next year or so after this is completed. Does this mean a student in Austin can be in the same classroom as a student in New York, looking at a professor, say, in the Chicago area, leading a class? Is that the way that's going to work?
That's exactly how it would work.
And it's interactive, so that the student in Austin can say, well, Professor, is that what you're saying about the subject, what I understand? And the professor would respond, and back and forth in that regard?
Right, and the value of it in a system such as ours, the Concordia University system, which has about 13,000 students, is that you can take advantage of some of the specialties and competencies of a professor in New York when such competencies don't exist, let's say in Austin. Mm-hmm. And you can have that professor doing the facilitation for the course. It also helps us to reduce costs, even though the initial startup costs for the hardware are not inexpensive. It helps us to reduce costs by allowing perhaps just one person to be facilitating a course in a certain subject area instead of one in each of the 10 schools.
Mm-hmm. What is the uniqueness in this regard? I mean, is there any other school in Austin, any other university or college that has this kind of connective opportunity?
There are some significant examples like that in states. Maine, for example, has a fiber optic spine that goes throughout its state and allows students at the main university and at outposts of the university to interact with one another. Mm-hmm. But this would be the first national system, so that University of Texas is a system of its own, but there is no counterpart to a system which has schools throughout the country.
Is that right? So you're really pioneering in this regard.
That's correct.
Well, I'd like to say that the pioneers that came from the German community that came into the States, and then from New Orleans to Austin through Giddings, I mean, that pioneering is finding its counterpart.
And some of them would like to make clear that the roots were not so much German as they were Wendish, a very interesting Slavic group of people who came from the borders of Eastern Europe on a boat about 600 strong to Galveston, and their names, which have more consonants than vowels in and are difficult to pronounce unless you know the approach, are very much apparent in Lutheran circles in Texas as well as at Concordia College today.
Well, I think that the distinctiveness of the school is found both, it sounds to me like, in its origin and in the kind of opportunities that it's offering in the state-of-the-art educational methods that you're talking about. And I think that the thing that I'd like to just give a little bit of a sense to is the religious component to this. I mean, you're not the only Missouri-centered school in the country, college. You're not the only religious-related school in Austin. But there is something about Concordia campus in terms of its values, in terms of its spiritual emphasis. Could you give us a little bit of a sense of that?
I would say our mission seeks to help students go into society and into the church equipped with a value-based, Christian-based education. And we try to provide that not only by lectures in theology. Each student at Concordia takes 12 credits in theology as a part of their studies, but through daily chapel services, through interaction with committed Christian professors, and through sharing with their fellow students the joys and burdens of their lives which have relationships to the faith. Increasingly, that's a challenge as we move away from being residential campuses in our country. Roughly 67% of our student body is commuter. And when you come in to take a class and then you go back to your job or to your home, you don't spend much time on campus.
Sure.
And if campus is the way in which people are formed, how does one provide spiritual formation in that new environment?
Well, that question is what we're going to leave for the moment, but come back to after we take a break and continue our conversation with Dr. Zerson from Concordia Lutheran College. Stay with us.
Serving Austin means serving you. That has always been the primary goal of Austin Metropolitan Ministries. We are religion in action through the work of these organizations. Each plays a key role in making the capital city a better place to live, but we can't do it alone. Do you have some spare time, talents, or any resources that you can share? If you do, please call AMM at 472-7627, because serving Austin means serving you.
Welcome back to Austin Faith Dialogue, and we're pleased today to have the new president of Concordia Lutheran College with us, Dr. David Zerson. And in the first half of the show, David, we were beginning to talk about the mission of the school. You're coming in mid-year here in 1995. Let's just project, if we can, however long your term of service will be here, what would you like to have had happen during that course of time?
I believe very much in a concept I call contextual and negotiated vision, meaning that I don't want to impose my vision on the school and have something be foreign to them. But among the things which I think are important in higher education today, which we'll be wrestling with and which will certainly impact us at Concordia, are diversifying our programming because of the new kind of student body which exists in our society today, 50% of which are over the age of 25. So developing programming primarily to meet a whole new student clientele, and providing educational programming which places a strong emphasis on cross-cultural experiences. I think especially here in the Southwest, as we prize the Hispanic roots of many of our people and the importance of that to our country with new economic developments such as NAFTA, it's important that people have appreciation for that and also some Spanish competency. So that's important to us, as well as inviting more and more foreign students to come into our environment so that not only can we learn from them, but they can learn from us. And we would hope to make that a strong percentage of our school. Likely, also the importance of the high-tech environment, which is ours at Concordia, the hub that we will be providing for the Concordia University system from Austin because of our studio production facilities, our emphasis on distance learning through our own television channel 26 will continue to be important to us. And so those are some of the emphases that you'll be seeing from us, all within the context of our commitment to Christian values as a part of the educational process.
Okay, so you're saying you can't control the outcomes, but you can identify certain aspects of service that this school can provide that you can already see in the works now.
There are key themes that we'll be working with,
Mm-hmm.
and exactly what they'll look like is something that we'll negotiate together as faculty, staff, board, and president,
Mm-hmm.
and students.
And students, and your support group otherwise. I suspect that you have an alumni group or the support of the families whose younger folks come here that also make your school a little different than, say, a public institution. Can you give us a little bit of a sense of that support that you've identified?
Well, I think there's a strong tie between the families of our students and between our church as well. Being very much of a Texas institution, the support of Lutheran churches throughout Texas is very important to our school, and they identify with us not only through their financial support, but a very important moral and spiritual support for the institution.
Mm-hmm. I mean, are most of your students Lutheran?
45% of our student body is Lutheran, and the remainder, there are strong contingents from the Baptist community, Presbyterian community, Roman Catholic community.
Mm-hmm. I'm sure you're asked this question many times, but and especially I would think that as students of whatever age are deciding where am I going to spend my time getting my higher education, why would they choose Concordia over another either public institution or church-related institution? What's your answer to that?
Well, sometimes the answers are obvious or maybe not so obvious, like my parents graduated from there, or I have a brother or sister who went there. And sometimes it's the obvious factor that that's the place that I got the best financial aid package from. But it's also true that people look to us for certain kinds of values and certain kinds of majors that we offer, which are unique. We have a strong environmental science program, a very impressive high-tech communications major, and many students come to us because they're studying to be professional workers in the church, so that we have a contingent of students who are studying to be pastors or parochial school teachers.
I see.
And so they choose us, of course, because of what we offer in that area.
Okay. Now, how large is the school? How many students?
The school is 700, roughly, and that's also one reason why people choose Concordia, because while there are also advantages to a large state institution, there are special kinds of advantages to a small institution.
More a sense of personal identity that way.
Where our faculty-student ratio is about 13 to 1, and 85% of our faculty have PhDs. So in that kind of a small environment, you interact with the expert as opposed to a teaching assistant in a large state institution.
Right. So the very small size of the place is an advantage from the standpoint of
the quality of teaching and education that you can experience.
Mm-hmm. Well, I have to admit, being amazed at the kind of diverse offering that you have and the variety of opportunities there for a school of 700 students. That really is unusual, I think, and as you might look around the country even.
We have to watch that we don't spread ourselves too thin, but it is true that we have some very strong emphases in business, in education. Our students rank among the top 3 of 66 institutions in the state of Texas when it comes to passing the exit tests for education. So that's a strong kind of a school for us. And even though we're only 700, we have some very important majors that students seek us out for.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think you you have a strong case to make. As a private school, small school with a diverse offering, but what about costs? I mean, more and more students, it seems like, are having to make the judgment in their families of what they can afford compared to what it would cost to go to a state school. What's your response in that regard?
Well, it's relative because the University of Texas is often seen as the standard because of its size and its dominance in the state of Texas, but the University of Texas tuition is the second lowest of the 50 states. So when you try to set your tuition over against the second lowest in the 50 states, you have problems as a private institution. Obviously, our tuition in a tuition-driven situation is going to be higher. Ours is roughly $7,500 tuition for a year, but that's also among the lowest that you'll find in a private school anywhere. So we try to appreciate the cost issues that families have to face, but on the other hand, we realize that as a tuition-driven institution, we can't rely on anyone else to provide our funding for
Well,
us.
that is relatively low. I mean, as private schools go, is that because you've got a good endowment or good support and financially from other sources?
I think the historical reason is that because in Texas, people have tried to relate to the existing public system, and that's probably deceptive to do that. At least coming as an outsider after 3 months, I find that somewhat deceptive to assume that that's how you'd set your standard. We are the lowest in our Concordia system also.
I see.
And that's an advantage if you live in New York or if you live in Oregon or somewhere and you want to come to a school in our system. You can find a school which has very reasonable tuition.
Well, I think one of the other things, too, is that to come to Austin to school from elsewhere in the country, I think there could be some draw from that standpoint, the ambiance of the city and the fact that you've got some advantages of a city and yet are not overwhelmed by numbers.
I'm quickly learning as a person who came here that the ambiance of Austin is very attractive, and that there are people who love to live and work here, as I already do. And so if we can sell that story to people around the country, I suspect that Concordia's option will be opened considerably.
Be on the growing edge of that system, perhaps. I think that in the few minutes that we have left, it's just a little bit of a historical background as far as our program and our association with Austin Metropolitan Ministries, which represents the ecumenical community. And our purpose on the show, as with what in some places is called like the Council of Churches, is to reach out into the larger community and let the religious folks and the people at large feel a sense of oneness. I suspect that your school, you have, based on your experience where you were before, and as you come here, you have a sense of community interest and outreach. Well, how would you define that?
I think there are a number of levels at which Concordia seeks to be involved with the community through business academic partnerships, through service to the community. We have a very interesting program you may not be aware of, in that students from an Austin Independent School District institution, Rosedale, come to our campus daily, and there are 25 profoundly mentally and physically handicapped students who are on campus attempting to experience something of the life of our campus, but also providing our students the opportunity to enter into their common humanity, but which has totally different kinds of dynamics than that which they experience personally. And so that is beyond cross-cultural. That's, in a sense, a transhuman perspective which they participate in.
These are like high school students coming on campus?
They tend to be young adults, tend to be college age.
Oh, I see. And what do they do during the time they're there?
They have a variety of activities in which they participate, service activities they themselves perform, for which they earn some money that they can use in the student union.
Mm-hmm.
But our students tend to adopt them and take them to chapel and take them to the dining hall and walk with them around campus and interact with them. And that's very touching for me to watch.
Oh, yes. Is that a new kind of experience for you?
It's a new experience for me, but Concordia has been doing this for about 2 years now.
Is that right? So that's an example of community outreach.
Right, and of community involvement, commitment to the overall community.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned something about connections with business as well?
Well, as we develop our continuing education programs, our adult programs, using our distance learning facility, we have the opportunity to work with businesses in developing programming to help them meet their needs through our own business division.
Mm-hmm.
And that's an area in which we'll be developing some new programs within the coming year.
And what about the churches? What's your connection with them as not just in a support capacity, but in a supportive one?
I think that the number of students from Austin who are representatives of the overall church community in Austin is very large. We have representatives of all kinds of denominations, and so they have come to experience Concordia as a very special place, regardless of their own denominational backgrounds. And they see Concordia as a place which provides that Christian value-based education from which they can learn, even if their denomination doesn't have a school of higher education in the area.
Mm-hmm. So it's not just the Lutheran students who go back to their parishes and spread the good word, but those from other
Christian students generally are strengthened by their experience there. Mm-hmm. And students who have no church background also discover a whole new kind of emphasis and a special relationship to the place that Jesus Christ has in our lives.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that you've given us a real sense of the uniqueness of the school and the spirit of the place, and we want to thank you, Dr. David Zierson, for being with us today, and Godspeed in your work as president.
Thank you for inviting me.
Right. And we're glad to have you folks having joined us in this conversation. Hope you'll be back with us next week on our next edition of Austin Faith Dialogue. I'm Richard Thompson, extending peace to each of you.
For more information, call Austin Metropolitan Ministries at 472-7627.